The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Lighting Controls podcast. We have another fantastic return guest for you today. But before we jump into the conversation, let me take a minute to remind everyone today's episode is presented by the newly rebranded LCA, the Lighting Controls Academy.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes and a lot of information about the new NAILD LSC. If you want to learn about it, check it out. But also, huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode. We cannot do this without your support. MW Connect is the sponsor of this episode. If you are unfamiliar with this name, maybe you know them by their previous name, McWong. They've rebranded as well as LCA has. They're now MW Connect. If you want to check them out, mwconnect.us is their website. They're still the same great group, award-winning Bluetooth mesh technology, been in the industry for decades now. They really know their stuff, and I highly recommend that if you have not seen what they have to offer, you should check it out. They not only have great products, but they are also heavily engaged in the industry and in the projects that they get involved in. So if you want a really excellent Bluetooth mesh solution, I highly recommend you check it out, mwconnect.us. But let's get into the conversation. So today we have another returning guest. Seems like we're on a bit of a roll with return guests, which is great. Bruce, do you mind just giving us a quick breakdown on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, totally can. Hi, everybody. If this is the first time getting a chance to meet me, my name is Bruce Clark, and I am the founding lighting Sherpa of Kaleido Light Lighting Design. I'm also the founding sensei of something called the Lighting Excellence Dojo, and I'm also a lighting design partner with Illuminated Lighting Design Services, and primarily focus on helping to empower, train, educate, and provide services on behalf of folks in the custom technology integration industry, focused primarily in the resimercial space. So maybe just kissing the commercial side of things, but mostly focused on the residential side of things.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us. It's always great to have you on the show, and especially because you're in that portion of our industry that we butt up against as well, which is the resi-mercial. You usually deal with like high-end residential homes or hotels or other places that kind of abut that commercial environment.
Yep.
But you mentioned Lighting Excellence Dojo. Do you mind explaining a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, the Lighting Excellence Dojo, super excited about it. Just last week, we had our second official beta class where we had about 10 people in. The purpose of the Lighting Excellence Dojo is really to add another voice in the lighting education conversation, where we are blending experiential-based learning around lighting design, lighting installation, just understanding kind of at a basic conceptual level, kind of what the lighting design process entails. And so what I said at the very outset for the class, and what I want to be woven into every class experience that we have, is that when you go to a dojo, a lot of people associate that with martial arts. And if you want to become someone that throws punches well, you're not just going to read a book that verbally describes punch throwing. You're not going to just look at diagrams about punch throwing. Now you're just going to have someone stand in front of you and either demonstrate a punch for you or actually punch you as a way of teaching, although those are all good ways of kind of moving forward. But the best way for you to learn how to throw a punch in a dojo is to throw a punch in a dojo. And once you've thrown the punch, now we are having an educational conversation, because then your sensei can say, that's a very good punch. Let's go ahead and do more of that. Or that was a little bit limp wristed. Maybe you want to adjust this or adjust that. And it really kind of takes the essence of theory out of the equation, and of the one equation of education, and really embeds it within the other practical aspect, where you think you know, now demonstrate your knowledge, and either it provides a platform of affirmation or a platform of constructive development. And so what we did, I thought was unbelievably positive. We had a whole mixture of folks that represent different roles within what I call the CI channel, and create a lot of cross-pollination, a lot of collaboration, and constructed an environment that gave designers a little bit more installation savvy knowledge, and installers a little bit more design understanding about the whys and the hows of why the fixtures are placed where they are, and which one should go, and then how do you actually install that to accomplish the designer's vision. So, so far so good. I think that there's broad application, and right now we have a narrow focus on installers as it's outlined, but based upon those that were participating, I know for a fact it is not exclusive to people that are only involved in the installation side of things.
Right. Now, if you can translate, you said, you need to throw a punch. What would be the equivalent of throwing a punch in the Lighting Excellence Dojo?
Anything and everything related to an effective practice in the conversation around lighting. So maybe the punch throwing would be, oh yeah, I'm good at selling lighting. Okay, so sell me on lighting. Or maybe that we do really good lighting deliverables. Oh, show me your deliverables. I really understand design principles. Okay, demonstrate that knowledge of design principles. Or, I know everything there is to know about linear LED lighting. Okay, here's a complex corner. Go ahead and use a solder connection. Attach it to the correct driver, and turn it up, power it up, control it in this way or that way. Anything that someone says that they have knowledge of, you say, okay, let's go ahead and demonstrate that knowledge, and then we can check it off. Or once you've demonstrated it, now maybe you translate that knowledge into, hey, your peer's struggling right now, why don't you go ahead and give them some of that wisdom so that they can also join you on the knowledge side of the equation. So many different aspects that the environment provides opportunity for.
And I was fortunate enough to kind of see this environment, but do you mind just giving us an idea of what the environment is? Because it's not just a lecture hall.
Not at all. Yeah. So we have at least 3 different, I guess you could say, stations of operation. The first one is a little bit more of a traditional classroom, where we have a video projector, you have a workbook, you're writing down in the workbook, we're delivering things more lecture style. But the purpose is really to allow that exchange to be 10 minutes or less. Then we have actual workbenches, where it's like, okay, now on your workbench, we're going to give you a set of lighting plans, and you and your partner are going to work at that station, standing up and going through your lighting plan, or I'm sorry, your architectural plans, and doing a scavenger hunt. So it's more participatory. You're up, you're moving around, you're collaborating with somebody else. And then once we move into the actual installation experience, we have a wall-mounted ceiling. That's more of like an arm that sticks off the wall. We have a downlight in that that's aimed at art that's on the wall, and so you can put in a downlight. You're actually doing the installation yourself. You're measuring, you're putting it in, and then you're also aiming and adjusting that light in real setting. And then next to that, we have a much more miniaturized version of an upper and lower cabinet that's also wall mounted. So you can practice the installation of linear LED into a very typical setting. And then even we have it set up in such a way where your linear lighting could be, we have these, the clips that you snap your channels into have magnets on the back side of them. And we have these the little metal tape inside, so you can like attach it in the front of the cabinet, middle of the cabinet, back of the cabinet, and just kind of slide it to find, is this an optimal position for where that linear lighting should go, rather than it's always 3 inches from the front of the cabinet, or whatever.
Right.
And in that way, they can understand why these different decisions have impact. The focus of this one isn't as much on those nuances of design, but it still provides a common platform. So, the actual installation piece where they're getting a little more practical, kind of, you know, read the room, like this is a kind of a simulated environment, than a more workstation where, they've done the design. And then we're also using that as a soldering station. We're using that as a place where you're measuring your downlights.
Mm-hmm.
We're using that as a place where you're doing other more active things. And then you go back down, kind of sit down, review, talk things over in more that lecture style format. So it really has a very dynamic kind of movement and flow throughout the experience that goes way beyond just a standard classroom.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I mean, it all sounds great, and it's obviously from an installer's perspective. Someone who's newer, it's they're getting a lot of experience. They get to work with other people. From a designer's perspective, it's invaluable, right? When you think about this, no matter what space you're working in, because a lot of designers work in sort of that classroom environment, and they work in theory, and they work in renderings, and things always look pretty on paper, right? But the real world is a very different experience. And when you're able to, as a designer, put your hands on something and understand cabinets, just understanding how that lighting installs and how you make that jump from cabinet to cabinet and everything, and just understanding how that wires affects your product selection so much. And just having that practical knowledge and not just looking at it on paper saying, this is the spec sheet, this is what I want. It's going to inherently increase their knowledge. It's going to help the design. It's going to help the installers. It benefits everybody. So
Yeah.
fantastic. What does your time in the dojo actually look like? Like, is this a 1-day class? Is this a week-long class? Like, how is this sort of structured as far as that environment goes?
It's a 3-day environment. It's a 3-day experience. We're laying out a solid foundation of this. Like, here's your client, here's the space, here's some general design principles and whatnot, and give them that understanding. Then we're going to take out a downlight. We're going to measure it. We're going to understand the height, the width, the depth, how wide or how narrow the hanger bars are. We're going to look at the specification sheets. We're going to ask you all sorts of questions about that and say, why would you choose a 750 lumen output as opposed to a 1500 lumen output on the same, downlight, and kind of work through those pieces, kind of laying that foundation before we start then moving down the path towards actual installation. Because I think that as a designer, even stepping onto a job site, like what I thought initially when I had the plans or when I had the RCP or even like a model, it's like, oh yeah, 1,000 lumens would go good in this space. But maybe you didn't quite realize, some other qualities about that space where now that the assumptions surrounding that initial decision on the design side don't necessarily bear out in the actual space itself. And so now you need to pivot. Now, what if the person doing the installation knows a little bit more of those nuances? Like, I know that Bruce said that, I need to think about these different things. It's not just putting a box in the ceiling. Hey, Bruce, got a little bit of a red flag here. I've got the spidey tingles about this decision. What do you think? Should we continue down this path or should we go the other way? And that just allows for that partnership on both sides to really be much more seamless and more fully support design intent and overall lead to a much more satisfied client on the back end.
No, and it what's interesting about this is that you really do drill down onto these, especially when we're dealing with tapes. You have to think about the drivers, you have to think about the controls, and so this is sort of where the discussion of controls comes in, because of the fact that it's not just enough to say, okay, we're going to stick a recessed downlight in the ceiling and be done with it. Most lighting designers know that there's layers of light that need to be implemented and followed. So, how do you handle that?
At this point, for the experience, there's a general conceptual understanding that these are important aspects to weigh. And so I know that, especially when it comes to linear, if you have a more complex installation, how do you zone that? How do you control those zones, whether those zones are controlled together, whether they're controlled independently? Are there other, controls protocols that you need to think about. I know that
Mhm.
with the dojo experience that we had this last time, we walked a few steps down the DALI path, and then we kind of hit some brambles and some weeds within the confines of the time that we had with the students that were there. A lot of valuable takeaways of like, okay, maybe for the beta, it was a good experience to have. Some people got through the weeds, other people got stuck by the weeds, some people got one thorn
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, they backed up. And so then what does that mean? What that means is
Right.
let's then not consider this a failure, but let us see this as a springboard for a DALI only or a
Right.
deep dive on DMX and DALI dojo. Let's do a dedicated dojo on just controls, and we can take that much further. Right now, we're just giving you a taste, but then that taste is going to open up an entirely new experience where we'll have, instead of the lighting installation training experience, we'll have the lighting controls training experience, or maybe the lighting design experience, or whatever. So right now we recognize, at least within the custom integration industry for these resi-immersial technology professionals, that one of the big gaps that we understand between people that just dip their toes in the waters of lighting and those that are really kind of rock stars is really getting over that initial hump of like executing on a design
Mhm.
and
Mm.
implementing that. So maybe there's been so much focus on sales. There's been so much
Right.
focus on using third-party lighting designers, or even leveraging services by various, layout services that either manufacturers or manufacturers reps provide. But okay, now I have these sets of plans. Now what do I do with them? Right?
Right.
Oh, thank you so much for your design services, lighting designer. I've got a whole bunch of product that I was able to sell as a result of the arrangements that we have in that space. Now, what do I do with the product? How do I know that I have the right product? How is it installed? You have an RD1X and now you have an RD1A, and which is which, so that I know that in this part of the ceiling I've got that or that. So right now, a lot of that has been very much learned through kind of going through the hellfires of experimentation. Now
Right.
we're giving
Mm.
a little bit more of that connectivity to kind of see that
Mhm.
through at a light level. Now you can take those principles and apply them in a much more complex and real world situation and scenario. So I think that those are
Well, and
really valuable takeaways. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that, keeping it simple is really the right move here because of the fact that you are kind of collecting people of different identities and roles within the
Mm.
industry, and because you're so
Mm-hmm.
focused on the CI channel, which is for predominantly residential, means that you're dealing
Mm-hmm.
with phase dimming most of the time, as opposed to in the commercial
Mm-hmm.
side, we're dealing with 0 to 10 volt as an average.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
either way, that analog dimming mentality is something that's challenging to overcome, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think keeping things simplistic makes sense. And
Mm-hmm.
there were, from what I saw, there were still controls components addressed. There was still conversation
Mm-hmm.
about controls. It was still a learning experience, but it was almost like, here's a taste. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
expand upon it, there's more to come. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I think a lot of people, when they come into these experiences, don't really get that hands-on. And as a result, I think it's a disservice to sit there for 3 days and not put your hands on anything. And in fact, you're
Mm-hmm.
doing the opposite. You're providing as much hands-on as you can so that these
Mm-hmm.
people really get the full experience. And I think that that's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
A-
Thank you.
And so, well, sure. And so, through this education, what is your overall goal here with this sort of
Mm.
initiative?
Um, if you guys pay attention at all to Light Eye and the Light Pod, Sam Corbel, shout out to Sam. Good job, Sam. Keep doing the good work that you do. This past winter, um, I had reached out to him, and apparently others had also reached out to him to say, "You have a fantastic platform, a great voice, kind of elevating the lighting lighting conversation for a specific audience, just like shout out to Lighting Controls podcast, my good buddies
Thank you.
Ron and Webster here, elevating the conversation for the broader community on these matters too. Um, Sam, because he's more kind of distributor, lighting rep, designer focused, approaches the conversation from a different perspective. And I said, hey, come check out Lightapalooza. He had a very limited kind of exposure to folks that are in the CI channel related to lighting. But I think this last time when he came, his eyes were really open to the fact that this is a viable, subcategory of professionals that have turned their eyes and their minds and their intention to the lighting conversation. And they are worth giving credible attention to as well from the lighting community. And given what are the biggest kind of points that anyone that talks about getting into the lighting game would point to in the CI channel is the fact that most lighting professionals have a bottom threshold for providing their professional services. Unless the billing is at this level, unless the scope of work is at this level, unless the complexity is at this level, I'm really not going to waste my time with it. And I think someone quoted me recently saying that 1 in 10 like luxury residential projects actually have a lighting design professional on them. So what do you do with the other 9 out of 10?
Right.
90% of a qualified market is being underserved in the area of their lighted experience. So part of the reason for me being excited about the dojo is I have limited capacity. Other lighting professionals have limited capacity. What if we just simply elevate that capacity, elevate those capabilities, elevate those nuances of what matters to us in the lighting design conversation so that a greater number of those qualifying residences and qualifying projects get better results and better outcome than relegating oftentimes those decisions to people who are only actually interested in connecting the fixture to power and not anything beyond the experience that emerges from that fixture once it receives its necessary juice. And so for me, I'm happy to deputize or apprentice anyone that wants to kind of follow this path or take it more seriously. Now, I think we've talked about this before. There is a fine line between those that really want to embrace the craft of lighting design, lighting outcomes, controls, design, controls, outcomes, and those that are only looking at this as a financial incentive, right? I just want to sell product. I just want to move boxes. There's going to be that, right? But I think truly those projects and those professionals that engage from more of like the spirit and the ethos of an IALD individual that is really about the design outcomes and not just trying to profit off of these decisions. I think those projects will rise above when you recognize that it's driven by a different motivation over the course of time. And I also think that for a lot of these guys that think that they've been in the lighting game and doing controls, maybe you've done centralized panelized control systems. Maybe now you're doing more digital controls, but you actually, it's almost like, now I know how to manipulate, let's say, for example, the bowstring on a violin. I can run the bow off those strings and I can squeeze the board, but do I know how to play music? Right? I'm sure as a controls perspective, you talk about control intent narrative, you talk about sequence of operations, what is the actual experience I'm creating for people? Or do I just use the 100, 75, 50, 25%, dimming options and call it done, and move on to
Right.
the next project? I think, that's another area of opportunity where, for folks like yourself, Webster, coming in the dojo, it's like, okay, level 2 might be understanding this controls protocols really well. Number 3 level, maybe number 4 level would be, let's create a control intent narrative. Let's really kind of, understand how to communicate and make these controls sing in a beautiful way so that when a person pushes a button, it isn't just dimming certain lights, but it really is crafting the necessary kind of vibe that space is wanting, right? all of those
Yeah.
things I think are on the table as we kind of move in this space. And so for me, I'm excited to elevate the conversation in whatever way I can, so that dealers, CI dealers, or CI professionals emerge more empowered than intimidated, in kind of helping to kind of elevate the entire experience for people in the lighting area.
So as you look at sort of the CI channel and bringing more people into, right, the conversation, and trying to elevate, what they can handle and do, are you
Mhm.
seeing, right, we know that the general population goes to the big box store and they buy whatever they buy,
Mhm.
and they're buying all their fancy color changing lights on Amazon. But from
Mhm.
that market, are you seeing a larger growth into people saying, I want to elevate a little more? So not your multi-million dollar mansions, right? But are you seeing more growth through the CI channel and a greater need for this to have more people, just based on, what's been made possible through the consumer market?
Yeah, I think there are definite inroads up and down that continuum, right? I just had a conversation yesterday with an integration company in upstate New York that is wanting to pursue two different paths. And this has been one of the paths has been an ongoing point of conversation for a while. I have yet to see it fully manifest, but the first path is what we've been talking about, that more 10,000 square foot house, multi-million dollar
Mhm.
investment. Their lighting budget's going to be, more than what my house even costs, right? Then the other one, to your point, is where the builder says, okay, if I'm making what I consider, what I call, because I have an architecture background, and I call these
Mhm.
kinds of houses cookie press houses. I put in I have my big cookie press. I put in the sugar cookie dough. I put in my little mold, and I go, and I've got like 12 cookies that look exactly the same.
Yep.
A lot of
Yep.
houses are like that. I've got my 5
Right.
models. There's
Hmm.
your house. You want another one? Okay, let me switch out to the next one. There's your house. And so if everybody's doing that,
Yeah.
then it's really just like flip a coin and I'll go with option A or
Mm.
option B and I'll get pretty much the same experience. Now that that's kind of a saturated approach, I think the builders are now in a position to say, how can I differentiate myself from my customers? So what
Hmm.
if, and this is their conversation, yes, this is more kind of commercial grade. I have 5 options, but what if a lighting designer was to provide the lighting layout on those 5 options? That would
Hmm.
be something where we can just say, hey, I know Webster, I have laugh about this. Like, let me sprinkle a little Tinkerbell lighting design
Right.
magic on this and make that project fly, you know. But it's kind of like that could be a differentiator, not only in terms of them selling the houses, but then the experience that's created for the people downstream, where they're not
Hmm.
subjected to what I call the unholy communion wafer of Satan himself,
Right.
where it's just kind of giving you this glare experience, but really, elevating that in terms of product, in terms of purpose, in terms of the general placement and the experience that they have on the back end.
Mhm.
Maybe that then opens the door for a more sophisticated controls. You get that smart home technology, but it's always a one-off. So now maybe we have a more
Mhm.
integrated approach that we can weave into that developer market. And so I think that could be another pathway, a subset down below that helps.
Mhm.
There are companies out there and individuals that have voices poised to the residential market. My mentor early on in my career, David Warfel with Light Can Help You, has I think he calls it the language of light, is his
Mhm.
blog. And he has this series called One Thing, right? Maybe you can't pay for services like mine, but if you can do this one thing, do this one thing.
Mhm.
So maybe just install a crown in your living room below your
Mm.
ceiling by this many inches. Just put some tape light in that. Don't just stick it to the side of the walls, but put it in the crown so it's going to
Yeah.
reflect it off the ceiling, and you just have a built-in cove. Or
Right.
maybe just knowing how to choose the right kind of table lamp is kind of moving you down the path towards design, so that the light's going to be delivered in the right way. One of the things I've done in my living room is to back kind of a poor man's tunable white DALI control. Oh, there goes my balloons. I don't know if you guys can see that. Uh,
I
I
love
gotta be
how
careful with
Apple
this
just
Apple.
infects every video now.
I know. Oh my gosh. Kudos, Apple. But like IKEA, for better for worse, they've got the little button that you can push, and it
Yep.
and it
Mhm.
has two parameters. One's intensity, the other is tunable white. I get
Yep.
three options. I just push a button like, oh, I want to read a book, get that nice bright crisp white. Oh, I want to like snuggle with my honey while we're watching a movie.
Mhm.
Change it to a nice warm light, and I'm starting to experience this at that level. And I think as we see the consumers moving more in that direction, that helps. Um, and one more thing about that I think is also interesting to note. There's a company that does controls. I would love for them to sponsor you guys. A company by the name of Savant. You've heard of them?
Yep.
Yep.
They now own GE Lighting, right?
Mhm.
And so they are also trying to provide at a product level points of entry to
Mhm.
allow consumers to start to step into this. I know their GE Sync is kind of a corollary to the whole Philips Hue. Not
Right.
quite at the same level of quality or functionality, but it does start people down that path. I bought some Sync light bulbs myself. My daughters, I hate
Mhm.
to admit this, they have a ceiling fan with four bare bulbs in the middle of their room. But guess what? My youngest daughter has named each one of those four bulbs like a different person's name. So Dorothy and
Yep.
Henry, whatever. I can't remember the names. And then
Oh.
it's all connected to our little Google Home. And so she's laying in bed. It's like, hey Google, turn off the lights. Hey Google, turn Dorothy on to 5%. Hey Google, change Dorothy to be red. Boom! Now she's got her night light just like that. And
Yep.
so
Uh, yeah.
it's like a poor man's Josh AI.
Well, and I mean, I
So.
think what's what is interesting about this environment, which, yeah, if we get to a certain threshold, we are kind of looking at commercial projects essentially that are just embedded inside of houses. But when we
Hmm.
get
Mhm.
to a smaller budget,
Mm.
we are kind of trying to figure out how to best to provide a quality experience for the occupants of those spaces. And
Mhm.
in some cases, yeah, you need to default to the screw based lamps that can color change, and that's all you get. um,
Mhm.
so I think to your point, there isn't a lot of accessibility to the skill set of a lighting designer or a lighting controls designer to the average homeowner.
Mhm.
It really is sort
Mhm.
of a pay to access resource.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
so I think to the purpose of this, it makes sense that what you're doing is you're empowering all levels throughout these projects to be able to engage
Mhm.
with knowledge. Because as we've talked about on this show repeatedly, education
Mhm.
is the fundamental element that
Mhm.
allows widespread adoption. And if we
Mhm.
don't
Mhm.
have people from all steps along this process educated, then
Hmm.
we're going to be missing out on that. And okay, fine, maybe I don't get the project, but by
Mhm.
enabling and empowering a dealer to be able to do this work, that may actually spread the education necessary for somebody to go, oh, you know what, this project needs a Webster on it, or this
Mhm.
project needs a
Mhm.
Bruce on it. And so everybody
Mhm.
does win at the end of the day when we
Mhm.
achieve that level of education. And so
Mhm. Mhm.
I know there are various um, target audiences, and so staying within the CI channel, I'm curious, what the motivation there was specifically versus commercial, industrial, or other sorts of
Mhm.
entertainment even.
Mhm. I think this has been the population that I've focused my professional energies on in the area
Hmm.
of lighting design.
Sure.
So it just kind of makes sense that I'm going to immediately connect with them. I did partner with a training company
Hmm.
that has already carved a significant niche and a significant level of endorsability, right? Hey, these guys have proven results. Now that they're
Right.
turning their attention to lighting, that automatically adds credibility to our efforts. Plus, I mean, this dude that I worked with is just amazing in terms of how
Mm-hmm.
he not only creates an environment for learning, but creates an environment for creating community within the participants, so that each class that emerges, they've got a bunch of new best friends, kind of like
Mm.
going to summer camp,
Right.
but like it's in a 3-day experience. That's kind of an amazing thing to experience. That goes way beyond just sitting in a training classroom. I
Right.
explained to the class early on that there's a big difference between those who create a learning environment and those who deliver content.
Mm.
And just
Mm-hmm.
because you call it training doesn't mean that it actually is training. There's a lot of folks
Right.
out there that are delivering training, but ultimately what I come away with is all that they just did is deliver content.
Mm.
I think early on when I was learning how to be a corporate trainer in another life, they said that the value of the training isn't on its delivery, it's on the execution of those that had that experience. What that
Right.
means specifically is, as a corporate trainer, if I do a good job as a trainer, guess what? You can do your job.
Mm-hmm.
That's the ultimate goal. And if you're not doing your
Right.
job well, then maybe your trainer didn't do what they needed to do to help you. And I think in this context, that's been baked in my lasagna for a long time. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to try to create that similar kind of experience that is referred to as participant-centered learning, as opposed to what I think a lot of content deliverers are, instructor-centered learning, right? You walk away saying,
Right.
that guy's a smart guy, as opposed to, man, I just did something. I
Right.
wish that we could share with you, Ron, some of the experiences of people that did things for the
Mm-hmm.
very first time. They're like, I just
Yeah.
did this.
Right.
Like that's not something that you're just going to walk away saying, yeah, I'm smarter now. Like, no, like I'm transformed, I'm changed.
Yeah.
I feel more empowered. I know one of the other major kind of points of focus, and I'm going to get back to your other question too, Webster, and I know that we're running out of time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another point of focus is the fact that other training experiences that are in here are either trying to, make you a lighting designer, like that's the focus, or
Yeah.
kind of sell our design services, but leave the hard stuff to us. And so you're going to walk out of this
Mm-hmm.
training either affirmed at a base level of knowledge or completely overwhelmed by saying, I can't do this. Will you please help me? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and neither one of those necessarily serves the greater interest of this community. Okay. Leave
Yeah.
that there. The beauty of the concept of the dojo as it goes beyond the CI channel, technology integrators in the residential space, not the commercial and industrial or whatever, commercial interiors, is that as this concept has been communicated, let's say for some of these more significant projects that we have, I had
Mm-hmm.
a general contractor for a very significant project that we're currently designing the lighting for want to send all of the installers for the project to the dojo as oh, there it is. And now I've got fireworks. I don't know.
For those of you who are not watching the video, Bruce's Apple computer is having a field day providing additional graphics to his background.
Yeah, because Bruce can't keep his hands to himself. Um, but he wants to send all of his installers to the dojo. Why? Because he doesn't want to have downstream problems after the
Mm.
fact when the design team leaves and when the installers leave. If they are at least given a base level of knowledge of how to do it right before they begin, that's an insurance policy against defects later on, because you know that the installation was done properly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Mm-hmm.
value even in having some electrical contractors that are now handling low voltage come into the dojo, learn how properly to put in this stuff, understand design intent, so that you don't just say, just stick it on that side of the joist, or there's a HVAC unit in the way, just throw the light wherever, we don't really care. Maybe make them a little bit more careful. There was even someone that was talking about the individuals involved on university campuses that
Mm-hmm.
do lighting, or even relamping is now becoming a big thing with LED technology emerging and doing replacement of older technology. Have them come to the dojo and understand some of these nuances, not only of what the technology does in the LED space, but also, how do you swap out optics and trims
Mm-hmm.
and aim and adjust, and have an experience? Put that optic in, stand back. How does that look? Do you like the way that looks? Do you not like the way that looks? Okay, go back up, change it out. Which direction should we go? Should we go tighter? Should we go wider? Do we need to do a wall wash? Giving them that kind of that experiential perspective that they carry with them into the field. There's a lot of applications that I find that could really benefit a wider audience. But right now, the foundation stone to kind of build on happens to be the CI channel, since that's where we've been working for so long. But I think myself and my training partner are recognizing that there's farther reaching implications than just this community.
Right.
That's awesome. So this all sounds extremely personal for you, right? Like very much you are 100% invested in this. And I love
Everything
it.
I do is personal, man.
So like, now I'm like, so what is your long-term sort of goal? Where do you see the dojo going? Where do you want it to go? Are you looking for ultimately this to kind of become something larger where you have manufacturers invested or sponsoring things? Or is this, you're keeping this very tight, but you see a growth path that you want to get to in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I would love anybody else that, has a space, has a passion. I would love to see dojos all over the place. I don't want it to be an exclusive one place for one. Just like in any dojo, you've got, beyond this experience that we're cultivating right now. I have the idea within certain communities of following the same belt system. So like you get a yellow belt on your light bulb for going through level 1 dojo. Now, as part of your level 2 training, if you want to level up, part of your training experience is then to teach the level 1s things that you learned from that experience. So we create continuity within that community. And so I think long term, or at least within this particular space of the CI channel, I really want to add legitimacy to what they're trying to do, right? I want them to really be seen as professionals that handle the technology, but are also passionate about the outcomes in the area of lighting, right? Whether they're driving it or not, it makes them a much better, more effective partner with a lighting design professional when they have a greater sense of what the lighting design professional's values are, what they're trying to accomplish.
Right.
So those are some more immediate things. Long term, I want anyone and everyone that has a lighted experience in their home to no longer accept basic presuppositions of undarkening a space, to quote a lighting design colleague, to move beyond undarkening a space to actually increasing or having a demand for a better luminous experience, right? So I have a very simple maxim that I've shared within building communities. At the end of the day, I think good design, within one kind of talking environment, is a better product that's given a better purpose leads to a better experience. And I think it's a simple maxim, and that obviously there's much more complicated elements there. But we're choosing good products. We're at least elevating that part of it, but then really instilling the placement of that with a more purposeful intent is what's going to lead to that better experience for the person. So then, my design partner says every light must define and defend its existence. And if I ask simple questions of the light and the light can't give me a proper answer, guess what? You're gone, and I think just having that level of critical engagement and not just saying, well, it's gonna, just tap my finger on my mouse and drop a bunch of circles, and then every one of those circles that I drop, I hear a cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. I think some lighting reps or some manufacturers that do design services, that's what they hear every time they tap their mouse. For me, it's like boom. I hear a big, kind of kaboom every time I tap my mouse, because that's a decision that I'm forcing that person to live with for the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. because the LED technology is designed to last a long time. And so there's a
Yep.
gravity to those decisions that I weigh, that I hope more professionals that engage in this think about, that there are repercussions. It's almost like, I was using the reference of maybe getting a tattoo. Anyone have a tattoo that you regret? You know, it's one thing
Right.
to write on yourself with marker because you know that's going to go away. But if you like put a tattoo there, like you got to really be married to that thing because like man, you try
Right.
to take that thing off, there's a lot of expense. You might end up with a little scar
Yep.
tissue. Similar
Right.
thing with bad lighting decisions too, I think. So
Yeah.
those are
Well,
my 2 cents.
we're almost out of time here, so I just want to kind of encapsulate what we've discussed here because I think it really is critical for our industry to have these sorts of resources, even if you're currently just focusing on the CI channel, which, first of all, I find it
Mhm.
so entertaining how we've co-opted the same initials for different
Mhm.
sections of this industry. So
Yeah.
CI, custom integration,
Exactly.
C and I, commercial and industrial, CI
Yeah.
for commercial interior. Like
Yep.
Yeah.
it's hilarious how we've all grabbed onto these two letters. But
Mhm.
for the CI custom integration channel, this is a phenomenal resource, especially because, as we've talked in previous episodes, the CI, the Resi world is bizarro world in comparison to commercial because you have people who know
Mhm.
controls, they understand controls, they don't understand
Mhm.
lighting, and
Yeah.
so as a result, this is a resource to help elevate those people who already understand how controls work to be able to
Mhm.
provide that. I like the analogy you came up with like a musician, but it's more of like a symphony.
Mhm.
If you only have
Yeah.
one violinist, you're not really hearing this incredible experience. It might be an incredible experience, just a single violinist, but
Yeah.
lighting is a symphony. You have multiple
Mm.
roles within lighting. You have multiple lighting sources that create different layers. So it's a full
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
And so to only provide light fixtures or to only provide lighting controls, you are really kind of hobbling the experience. So providing this hands-on experience is an incredible resource,
Mhm.
but also, from the commercial side, as Ron alluded to, a lot of new lighting designers in the commercial side live inside the virtual environment and they don't actually get their
Mhm.
hands on these sorts of resources. They don't understand what happens when you mount tape light right above a textured backsplash. So having that
Mhm.
experience, seeing what that's like, is really
Mhm.
so helpful for them to be able to understand the decisions they're making. It's not just
Mhm.
what are my foot candles on the floor, but it's what is the
Yeah.
actual impact of that light
Yeah.
source in the space. And so having this sort of experience, I see some incredible things that can come out of this resource. And additionally, like you were alluding to with lighting controls, I think my percep perspective is if you don't understand your light source, then how can you control it? So getting people
Yeah.
to
That's
understand
good.
the basics of lighting design then
Hmm.
primes them to be able to receive education about controls. And so
Mhm.
getting people to a point where they're comfortable with lighting and being receptive to controls makes a lot of sense to have that be the next step within this whole
Mhm.
curriculum. But the whole idea is really fun. And I just want to make sure that people got the acronym of Lighting Excellence Dojo, LED, because
Mhm.
that I did not catch on to until till like a few weeks in,
Oh
after you had
wow.
presented this idea to me. Yeah, it snuck right past me, and so it's
Even
hilarious, but
you.
it's perfect. Well, I mean, I'm also a flawed individual, so
Yeah,
but
I get it. I get it. But you're
I
sharper than the average bear. That's for sure.
well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. But so having this resource, and I love the idea of spreading it so it's not just a
Mm.
single location. It is a
Yeah.
communal effort, is
Yep.
really wonderful because that is how we achieve this education. We can't just be sole
Mhm.
proprietors of intellectual property. We have to be ready
Exactly.
and willing to share our knowledge.
Absolutely. I agree.
Awesome.
Ron,
Bruce, thank you
what you got,
so
man?
much for
Anything?
a
Yeah.
wonderful call. Of course I do. Are you kidding? Of
Ice
course
this
I
cake,
have
Ron.
something.
Put some icing on this cake, Ron.
But no,
Oh.
seriously, thank you for an amazing conversation. It's always so much fun when we have you on. And the one thing that I will tell, and I don't think we have a lot of residential listeners, but the one thing I can say to anybody in the industry at all is to be curious, right? Ask questions, ask why, question why, and pay attention. Like it can start so simply, just paying attention to your surroundings. The next time you go to a restaurant, you're out at the mall, you're here, you're there, look around, look up, pay attention, look at certain things, ask why did they do that, why did they put that light there, why did this thing happen. And I'm really sorry the next time you drive past your neighbor's house and realize that they've got two fixtures beside the door and they're different color temperature lamps, or they're one color and the chandelier inside the window is something completely different. And I'm really sorry that I just ruined your life, but these are the
Yeah.
things that some of us deal with every single day. So, but that's really what it comes down to, right? Really being curious and asking why, and putting just even that much more effort into some of these things and having a better understanding of how the impact that lighting and the choices these designers make can have in the space, and how it affects the owner, whoever's in the space on a day-to-day basis. It makes such a huge difference. And just spending even just a little time on that is absolutely crucial. So, Bruce,
Love that.
thank
I'm going to
you
see your
so
why.
much.
I'm going
Go
to
ahead.
last thing. I see your why, and I think that's a great way to segue. But of course, while I was listening to you, I was thinking. I ask myself this question: okay, why do they do that? What would I have done? Like,
Yep.
putting yourself in the position of being the designer. Like that's what they did.
Right.
Maybe that's why they did it. How would I have approached that situation? That's where I think that same kind of evolution kind of emerges within your own practical engagement of this topic. So thank you. That was the cherry on top of your icing. Oh, maybe I don't know.
I love it. I love it. Bruce, thank you again. I will close us out and remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Academy.
And it's financially supported by the
Beautiful.
National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes, including the ones with Bruce that we've had in the past, and a whole lot more. But also, huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode. We cannot do these shows without their support, MW Connect. Again, if you're unfamiliar with them, maybe you've heard them by their old name, McWong. They are now MW Connect, but they're still the same award-winning Bluetooth message solution. Been in the industry for over 40 years now. We've had them on the show before. They really do know their stuff. And so if you want to elevate your lighting controls on your projects, I highly recommend you check them out, mwconnect.us. But thank you for joining us. And Bruce, thank you for an awesome conversation.